Morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. I am the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. My name is Doug Brunke, and I'm very fortunate to know many and most of you. And I want to know all of you because the fact that you're joining us today means that you're interested in global business. It also means that you're interested in leadership, and that's a topic that is essential if you're going to be successful on the international stage. So we got the best to talk about this topic. Barry Berman, he's actually located in Colorado, but he works with people all over the world. He is an expert on international business and leadership, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Barry, like me, is from the New York area, so despite that, he's a really good guy. I'm only joking. He is a great guy. One of the things that we're going to do today is he's going to go through some information, and we're going to encourage you to ask questions. It's a webinar style, so if you really want to talk, we can elevate you up to the stage, if you will. But in the meantime, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A section, and we will have time for Q&A throughout the program. So Barry Berman, your company is Integris Consulting Group, and one of the things that I admire about Barry is the focus around leadership and the word integrity. And those of you, hopefully you've had a boss or someone you've worked with that over the years clearly demonstrated integrity, and you understand the alignment between that word and leadership. And Barry fully understands it because he's been studying it and speaking about it, for decades. So Barry, thank you for taking the time today. We look forward to learning more. You have something to say, young man, and we're looking forward to hearing it.
I do have something to say. So thank you very, very much, and the Global Chamber, for the opportunity to be here and share some ideas that I think will be very fruitful. We are going to do one or two, I think it's at least one exercise, which I'll have people write, but they can do that there. So at their home or their office. So I think the thing we want to start is sharing my screen. So I'll do that. There we go. Can you see it?
Looking good. Love the first words.
Yes, I did that intentionally. So just some quick background. I own a boutique, small consulting company. We've been around since the year 2000, have been dwelling in this whole world. You might say it's ontological leadership, a different way to look at leadership. And what we're really about is creating leaders as their natural self-expression. So when we're talking about leaders and leadership and learning leadership, it's a bit difficult to learn leadership if you've got to be a certain way or to remember what the coach or the person who is training you, like if you're out in the field and you're playing a football game or some kind of game, the coach is coaching you. You don't have time to remember what the coach is saying. You have to be effective in the moment with whatever it is you're dealing with. And we've seen that people have a natural ability to be a leader, and they have barriers to experiencing that. And we offer a program called Being a Leader and the Effective Exercise of Leadership. And the whole purpose of that is to remove those barriers or take the significance out of those barriers, or enable people to let go of those barriers so they're fully able to be naturally a leader. So that's what we're after here. So what we're going to discuss here is we've seen that there are at least 4 fundamental ways of being or elements that are critical to just getting on the court of being a leader. And we're going to briefly touch on these and have an interaction. If there are any questions or you have something to say, I guess we could set it up that way. So here's the first thing I'm going to propose. You and I don't see the world as it really is. See, the way our brains are designed neurologically, we can't take it all in. The brain just can't see and match everything with everything else to function effectively. So it only takes in certain things. So I think I can demonstrate that by asking a volunteer called Doug to just read what the next slide says. And that's all there is to do, Doug. Are you there?
I am. Yep.
Yeah. And I think we could, and I'd like everyone in the audience who's out there to do the exact same thing, is just read what the slide says to yourself, or read it out loud. All right. All right, Doug, you ready?
I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, the first one we're going to talk about is integrity, but let's look at the first slide. Can you read that to me? Let's read it out loud.
I love Paris in the springtime.
Excellent. And there's something you missed, though. Can you see anything else that's there?
I see the 2 X's at the bottom.
Yeah, that's important because that's what I asked you to read, right? Now, in the audience, if you're looking at this, this isn't a parlor trick. This is how our brains work. So, Doug, try it again and read word by word.
I love Paris in the springtime.
Yeah. Now, I have done this with CEOs and C-suite and presidents of companies, and they all do pretty much the same thing. We don't see what's out here. We see what our brain sees. And why am I talking about that? Because the topic that we have, that I'm going to share with you, there are certain blind spots we have that we don't see operate in our lives, impact our lives, result in certain ways, and we have all the explanations and justifications of why things go the way they do, and might not accurately be that way. So let's just start out with one of them, and that is integrity. And there's another way to look at integrity beyond what we normally think integrity is, beyond morality, beyond ethics and following your moral compass. And I am not knocking that. That is mostly how we relate to integrity in the world. You know, what's good, what's bad, what you shouldn't do, what's the right things to do. Don't do the wrong things. And then when we do those wrong things, we feel guilty about it. Or we operate on top of that to be as effective as we can. And what I'm suggesting is that is not something to knock, but if you look out in the world, it's not working real well. Another way we can look at it is to look at integrity as something that has things work in life. And I'm going to specifically say it's making promises. You know, making promises to yourself because you're really critical of a person, and making promises to other people and keeping them when you make promises. And a lot of times we don't even know that we're making these promises. And then when you know you can't make the promise and fulfill on the promise to whoever you're promising to, including yourself, you fix it or you clean up whatever mess is made. What that provides as a leader in training yourself to operate that way rigorously is things just begin to work around you. We don't see that where it's like that little trick I showed you there. We don't see the impact that not keeping our word and not fixing it has on ourselves and other people. And we don't have the time to go into a whole long explanation. But if you just start to practice as rigorously as you can, another way to look at integrity as making promises. Now, there's another side of it. I guess I could say like a bicycle wheel. If you look at a bicycle wheel, it has total integrity to it. You know, it works perfectly when it comes out of the shop. And it has all the spokes and the design of it's just right. So it's designed to do what it's supposed to do. when you're riding a bicycle. You can look at that in organizations as well. You know, in organizations, your job description and what you're exactly responsible for, and that you actually fulfill on what your boss is expecting of you, is a certain integrity to it. And then how the organization is designed has a certain integrity to it. And fulfilling on your promises as a company and as an organization to your customers, that you actually fulfill on what you're selling and what your service is. And if you don't do that, you know, you find ways to clean that up. And I have found, you know, there are companies like that do that. You know, my experience mostly of Southwest has been that, Southwest Airlines. And there are many other companies that do that. And then each of us have had the experience where they don't do that. And the breakdown that is, and the problems that causes, and the disruption and the upsets that it causes when a company doesn't honor its purpose. So there's a lot more to integrity and exploring that. And, you know, we're not going to be able to do that right now. Okay, the second one, Doug, is there anything anyone wants to say or a chat about, or any questions, or shall I just move on?
Yeah, I would encourage folks as you're going along, raise your hand and or make some comments in the comment field as placeholders. Otherwise, do what I'm doing is just I'm making notes on questions that I have and to be able to answer or to ask later. So yeah, I would keep going, Barry. Really good information so far. Really thoughtful.
Yeah. And then, so that's one of the first critical ingredients to being a person who is a leader in life, in their own life, and a leader of others, is you've got to have this kind of integrity beyond morality, the integrity of having things work around you by honoring your promises. Second thing, so we can get this to work, is being straight, real, authentic, and how you present yourself out in the world. So what do I mean by that? Being straight, real, acting consistent with what you say and with your promises. You know, having, in a sense, at least when I was growing up, we used to have tongues and shoes. Do they still have that? I don't know. But anyway, having your tongue match your tongue in your shoe, like walking the talk and doing what you say you're going to do and honoring that. And telling the truth to others about where you have not been truthful. You know, a lot of times it's very uncomfortable to say certain things and communicate certain things and be honest about certain things and say things as they really are when there are high stakes at play. You know, telling it like it is for you, no need to hide anything. So there's something about being natural, freeing yourself up to naturally take the most appropriate actions, given the situations you're dealing with. So when you start to tell the truth about areas that you might not be authentic about, where you discover maybe you've been inauthentic, that really opens up room for people to communicate and be straight with you, rather than they feel like they have to hide things. So with that, I'd like to do an exercise with you. I'd like you to take out a pen and paper. I'll give you a second to do that on your desk or wherever you are, or on your laptop or on a pad, anything like that. And just take a moment to list where you are not being real with yourself or with others. And this is confidential. No one's going to ask you about this. Where are you pretending to be some way and are hiding what you think or feel? You know, maybe you're putting on a facade or not saying it the way it really is for you. You know, you have to tiptoe around and not really communicate what's real, what the difficulties or challenges you're having in your job or with your colleagues or with your partners or in your organization. There's certain things that may not be working and it's difficult to communicate those things. You know, where is that so in your work life and your personal life? And I'll just give you a few minutes just to jot some things down. You may have colleagues on a team that there are things that really need to be said that you've been withholding.
Barry, while folks are pulling that together, I have a quick question. So this one is a tough one for me, one I've wrestled with for a long time. I think because of my time in Japan and kind of the hone tatamai concept, which is the hone being honest opinion and thought and being real and communicating it, and the tatamai of there's a wall between you and other people. And at work, you've got the tatamai. You don't really give your thoughtful impression. And what really hit me was a time, and this was our best customer in Japan. We went out, as often happens, third place. So we went to dinner, we went to a second dinner place, and then we went to a third place for singing and additional alcohol. And so we were all pretty toasted at the end of the evening. And the head of the company, huge company, he fell back in his chair and onto the floor.
Wow.
And it was like shocking. It was like it woke everybody up, right? We were having this great time, but he was okay, or seemed to be okay. And we picked him up, and I think we might have sang one more song, and then we were done. And so the next morning I come into work, and it really impacted me. And I started talking about, I wonder if Ito-san is okay. And they were all shocked that I was talking about it. But that, in their culture, you never talk about what happens in all of these places, especially the third place. And so I think there's cultural things, but there's also things in any culture where it makes sense to talk about it, and sometimes it's better to leave sleeping dogs lie. So how do you make that decision?
Well, that is a tough one. Well, one thing is, if you're working in a different culture, it really makes sense to do all your homework before you even go there. Right, Doug? To really discover the practices, the appropriate way to deal with things before you enter into any conversations, business-wise, because you want to be totally appropriate and honor their agreements. There are certain agreements that are just that way in that culture, right?
The issues of like being real, like not only your own behavior, but like if somebody's not doing the work, how do you communicate that, right? This topic is, I think, related to that, although maybe you're really saying about us, right? How are we deceiving ourselves or others around things that we don't really feel, or things that aren't right? I don't know if it extends to other things and other people, but it's a great question to ask.
Yeah, sure. And it is very challenging given what you were sharing and whether it's appropriate to bring it up. You may have to feel it out and actually pull the person aside and maybe talk to them on a one-on-one basis rather than a whole group, which might just totally be disruptive. I've never had to deal with that. I've been down and worked in South America, but I've never been over to Japan.
And the other quick question on this one is, as I've been thinking about this one, it's tough, right? This is like a psychological potential, spider web of nonsense of dating all the way back to as our kids. And so I'm guessing that there's even stuff that I can think of things, and then there's probably stuff that is so radioactive that we don't go there. So how do we? And does it make sense to uncover some of this? And who does that? Is that like a psychologist, or your wife, or you, or, how do you,
I wish I had an answer.
And how beneficial is it? I mean, some people kind of they're totally not in touch with the reality of how not only what's out around them, but the way they're addressing it, right? And maybe that's a good thing, but in leadership, it's probably a bad thing.
Yeah, I had a really great coach, and the coach says to me, from time to time, you're going to come up against what he called integrity collisions. Like, what the right thing is to do, but if I do this, it could cause this disruption, or if I go that direction and don't do it, it's going to be disruptive. And his coaching was, and I have it on my wall, always do the right thing, and you're the one to figure out what that is. I mean, that didn't help very much. But it made me think about it and take a look. And as we go through this, you're going to see, rather than being a victim to those things, you can be the generator of it. You can be the one who stands for that. I'm responsible. And it takes the total victimhood out of it, like responsible for all of it, Doug. But we'll get to that.
So sorry to divert, but now.
Oh no, it's perfect.
Everybody's got their list full now.
Yeah, they have, and I'm not going to do anything. The whole purpose of this is for you to look, because you've got to see this for yourself, and you can do whatever you want to do with this, but it's right in one's face, you know. I have it myself. So let's see where we are. So if you're going to be a leader, you need the courage to be straight when you're wrong or stupid or irrational or naive or silly or just plain dumb, because you will be. Isn't that true for all of us? From time to time, you know, we have egg in our face. And just to be real about it and say, you know, I did that and I have egg in my face and I apologize. It was silly. I'm sorry about that. How do we fix that? Real, not easy, but it's real. All right, next one is you're up to some big things that people want to follow. I would say that's the third foundational element. Well, so what are we talking about here? Is you're acting and behaving a function of living something bigger than making money, gaining success, or stature. You know, that your life is about something bigger than the ordinary or customary how you and I currently are in life. You know, are you up to what you don't know how to do? It's real easy to do the things you know how to do. But what about those things that we take for granted or we don't know how to do, like maybe even making promises you don't know how to keep? Now, that sounds a little contradictory to what I said before, but you can make big promises in life. You know, I know people who have big promises that their commitment is to end starvation on the planet or end disease. Or maybe it's something as simple as, you know, taking care of my community, the city that I live in, or my, you know, my whole area of 85 homes in which I live near. You know, where can I, you know, stand in the middle of there and look out and see what's wanted and needed and communicate that with other people and be up to something bigger than just making money and having a good career and all of that. Because I'll tell you, in my experience of being successful, most of it's hollow. It's great to make money. I'm not knocking it. And it really supports me, but it's not the whole game. So my questions to you to think about is, what is your life really about? You know, and what's your career about? And what are your relationships really about? These are just awesome questions to sit in, to dwell in, to just go to sleep at night with and see what shows up, rather than just looking for one answer or the answers, like living it inside of it. Let's see. Okay. And by the way, there'll be times when you're going through what seems to be the valley of shadow of death, I think they call it. You will experience being challenged and thwarted, and sometimes with a sense of just, it looks all hopeless. I cannot see how to do this. You know, a profound sense that you're inadequate for the task at hand. And each of us, if we haven't already experienced that, we will, if you're really up to being a leader in your life and leading others. And having this big purpose in your life, which you don't just find it, you have to invent it. And if you're inventing a big purpose in life, it gets you through those hard times, because we're going to make this happen no matter what. You know, and when Kennedy said, guess what? We're going to the moon and returning safely. There was no predictability that we were able to actually do that. The Russians were way ahead of us. And this man did his research and his homework and took this stand that we were going to do that. And we had multiple failures. People lost their lives, situations didn't work, and we got to the moon, even with Kennedy not around. So that's one solid example of it. And the last wing I want to discuss, the fourth foundational element, is your willingness to be responsible for all of it. Owning all of it, everything in your organization, in your life, like you have something to do with it. It's not somebody else. And this isn't like given, you have to, it's like a place that you stand, you put a stake out in the ground, you say, this is where I'm going to come from in dealing with the things that come at me. You know, it's how you relate to each situation you're dealing with rather than the situation itself that is critical to your being an effective leader and leading others. You know, no blame game or pointing to others for the reason things didn't turn out. It's all you. And it isn't you like blaming yourself. It's just like, I'm here and I'm going to deal with this effectively. You don't get if you find yourself getting psychological about it, you put that aside, or you what philosophers call bracket it back up behind you, and you deal with things as they are. And it takes away any victimhood to it. And it doesn't stop you, by the way, from holding other people responsible for their promises and fulfilling on their promises. You know, owning it all, owning it all is made up. It's a stand you take on yourself that gives you power. It leaves you operating in a whole nother world. And Thomas Kuhn, who wrote this breakthrough book on paradigms back in '62, I think it was, said, though the world does not change with the change of paradigm, the scientist afterwards works in a different world. So that's pretty much, Doug, what I have to say about the four areas that are critical ground to stand on. Here's me, to make the kind of difference you want in life as a leader.
Really important things. What I encourage folks to ask questions in the audience now, and please use the Q&A section, or feel free to raise your hand, and if you'd like to come up on stage and ask the question. So what I wrote down was, number one, integrity. Number two, be real and be honest. Number three, be bigger than ordinary. And basically people want to follow something that's bigger than themselves, bigger mission, if you will, a bigger vision. And then four, be responsible. And so I probably left something out, but those are really key things, and they're all interrelated, aren't they? When you work with, maybe this would be a good time to, I wanted to do this at the end, but this could be a good time for us to understand, how do you work with people and who do you typically work with? Like on these four elements, do you have coursework, or do you coach, or how does it actually work with people to get them to be good at these areas, be more cognizant of the reality of their reality, and be able to do the kind of things that they want to be able to do, you know, to change the world in positive ways and have impact on others, etc.
Well, one thing to understand is, you know, last time I looked it up, there were 225,000 plus books, I think, on leadership or leadership development on Amazon. Now that tells me, Doug, that mostly nobody knows anything about it, because there's 225,000 of them. There ought to be 2 or 3 or maybe 5 that when you read a book, you actually show up as a leader. So the big piece of this is discovering for yourself what it is you're reading or what it is someone's teaching you. You have to find it out for yourself. You actually have to like riding a bicycle. You know, somebody tells you how to ride a bike and you get on it, and for the first time and you keep falling, you have this experience of falling all the time, you know. My father was behind me holding the back of the bicycle as I went along, and then one day he wasn't there, and I turned around. What happened? And I actually discovered balance. And in that moment, I could never not know that. There is so much in life that's hidden from us that we take for granted, or we assume, or we have beliefs about and explanations about that give us no access to discovering. So we work differently. We work backwards. We work to uncover. I'm going to say it this way. There's informational learning, which is the kind of learning where I just talked about. You read books and you get as much as you can out of it, or go to classes and get as much as you can, or go to things like this, and maybe you'll get one or two things. But there's something called transformative learning, which pretty much most people don't know anything about. Even the big consulting companies don't know what transformation is. And that is, it's starting to uncover and discover these beliefs, these taken for granted obviousness, this assumptions of how things are with ourselves and how things are in our organizations. And there's beliefs in organizations that were there 50 years ago in an older company to, 10 years ago to a younger company that run us. And when you're blind to those things, you can't be as effective as you could be. So we're in the business of uncovering those. And once you start to see them, you're free. And matter of fact, can I answer one of these? There's a question here, Doug.
Yeah, no, I'm really enjoying this question. And I'll either preface it or explain a little bit more about why this particular question is very interesting, because Erica is amazing. She's an amazing leader, and she's so capable and so able to do things. And she's like one of the most wonderful people that I've worked with over the last couple of years. We've put some programs together. And so I find her question fascinating. You want to go ahead?
Can I read it out loud then?
Sure.
Do you think anyone can be a leader? I ask because in my personal life, I'm very much a leader, and my leadership is driven by emotion and passion. But in my professional career, I am very reactive, and that can sometimes hold me back from being a good leader or even attempting to lead. I would love to know if you have any advice on how to better my approach to being an effective leader. So, see, that's authenticity, because you're willing to say it as it really is.
Yeah.
I think being able, Erica, this would take 6 days to do, but we don't have 6 days. But I think if you can begin to start to maybe allow yourself to experience that reactiveness, like our emotions and our feelings and all the thoughts that run by when we get into situations that you probably don't have much control over. That's part of what it is to be human. If you can kind of let that be there, I don't know any other better way to say it, maybe embrace it, maybe even make it your best friend. It sounds a little strange. If you cannot resist it, it will let you be. I think that's the best way I can say it at the moment.
The one of the things that this question raises for me, and I'm really glad the way you answered that, because maybe one of the reasons why I really enjoy working with Erica is her authenticity. It comes really clear, and she's just really good person to work with. I'm wondering, and this is where, when I read this, how much damage do our parents cause? Or maybe not personalizing it to parents, but aren't we so many times we're effective because our parents hold us to a high standard to get stuff done, and then as we become adults, we almost use that in a negative way to say, well, we're not good enough, we're not able to do that, and maybe I'm misreading into it to personalize it into my own, but that was the issue that I had. I was very much all of the things that Erica talks about. And then I used it against myself to hold me back in leadership because I didn't think I was good enough. And for me, as an outsider looking at Erica, I can clearly say she is good enough. She's great. So is there something inside us, and
Oh
sometimes
my
inside
God.
any
I
holding
don't
us
think
back?
that you and I see to the degree, and I'm using it this way, that our brains run us. Did you know that, and this has been proven, I can't remember the name of the scientist, you can look it up, that you don't decide whether to go left or right when you're on the road. Your brain has made that decision up to 10 seconds before you're conscious of it. Up to 10 seconds. And they're getting more and more effective with MRIs to show that we don't have a lot to do with it. So maybe your brain generates a lot of these feelings, and maybe it was some incident you had when you were a child. I'm not a psychologist. I took psychology, but I'm not an expert in it. That's all some mechanisms from the past. I think the job is to take that past that's out in front of us and put it where it belongs in the past. That's a whole nother conversation.
And to be real, like you talked about, and how you would your admiration for Erica's question and her ability to be real about addressing something that she sees.
Yes, and the other thing is, and speaking to what Erica said, to not make wrong your experience of yourself. And, the more you try to push it aside or ignore it or not allow it, the more it builds a bigger foundation. I have found, some people experience stage fright. I play guitar. I used to be on stage a lot, and there were times I had stage fright. When I was able to accept the stage fright and actually allow it to be there, it went away.
Okay.
So the resistance to it gets us. There was one other thing that, yes, do you think anyone can be a leader? Yeah, but you have to also take into account human resources. You have to take into account the certain knowledge as a leader in whatever field. You do need to know those things. There's just not what I'm talking about. It's part of it, but you do need to know some of the other things that you in your particular field that's critical to being a leader. So anyone can be a leader, and you have to take into account some of the things that people are dealing with. By the way, there are short people who are very effective basketball players compared to someone who's 7 feet tall. How come? It's not all talent. It's how you deal with things, how you see things, maybe, huh? Then there's another question. Anything else about that, Doug? Should we just, from Michael? Michael has something.
Erica, hopefully that answered a lot of your question, and didn't mean to put you on the spot, but really great question, and really appreciate you asking. Thank you very much. Yeah, please go ahead. There's a question from Michael there.
Yeah, and then Erica did say very interesting to think about. Thank you both. That makes a lot of sense and can relate to everything said. And you're always welcome to email me or contact me, Erica. And then, hi, Barry. What would you say are some of your best and favorite experiences in growing leaders? Oh, it's so good. In growing leaders, my best experiences. I tell you, I'll share this. I worked with a team of leaders in Australia. And I'll briefly say something about this as a whole team. So the team was a exploration group of a mining company in Australia, a very big mining company that got eaten up years later. But the VP of exploration brought us in because the big problem they had was that each of the groups, like New Guinea, China, South America, US, Canada, all would fight for and want to get their budgets, the budget money, which was about 62 million that were given to them as a whole group. So they had to divvy up that money. And they would get together once a year to fight for their agenda. I got the best project. I'm going to get most of the money so that we can be successful, because it was like $19,000 to drill one hole. And you got to drill a lot of holes to find world-class ore bodies. So my colleague and I went in there to work with that leadership group to really have them start to see what it is that runs them. What are their assumptions as a group and as a team and as individuals? And see, once they see what's blinding them, can they invent a new strategy to take them forward into the 21st century? And they did that. They actually had a breakthrough in 4 days. And what they decided to do was to put aside the entire past, their entire agenda of how they did things. And they all came together as a group to look at the best areas around the world that's the most likely success for finding world-class ore bodies. Do you know what it takes to let go of your own ego and to pick out, even though it's not yours, it could be threatening that someone else is more successful than I am? They let go of all of that. That is inspiring to me. And by doing that, they chose and sent all the resources and all the money to these 3 or 4 areas around the world that looked like the most likely to be successful. And by the way, it was, if you were lucky to find a world-class ore body, 1 in 7 years. So they made up this overarching vision of 10 and 10. They would find one every year. That was that 10 and 10 was the critical vision that got them to operate and reorganize themselves. So to let go of your own agenda and co-generate a future that everyone would win was a big breakthrough. Hope that answers it. Oh, then someone said, lots of things to say in the topic, Doug. Impact of family and startup failure, particularly parents. My own example, if you speak Spanish, see the Latin American Failure Institute in Mexico. Okay, that's just kind of an inform. Anything else that I'm missing here?
Yeah, the Failure Institute came out of a group that we semi-collaborate with. I won't say their name because it's a pretty harsh name, but the idea of sharing failure as a leader or in your business, is cathartic to some extent, right? It's funny, and the way they do it is you go up on stage and you've got whatever 10 minutes at a bar usually, and you say how stupid you were, in terms of. And the one story for whatever that sticks with me is a good friend of down in Tucson who is a politician, and I don't think he's been successful yet. I know he's running again, but he's been successful in business. And he's been unsuccessful. And he shared, an idea that he had about a restaurant that he was convinced was, the restaurant, and it failed. And he explained, all the reasons why, and so I think that goes to being real, right? To some extent. Of what you're right, like addressing like what you did, taking accountability for the things that you're in the moment and in retrospect.
And Doug, we have a lot of emotional baggage that goes along with failing in our culture. I don't know what it's like in other cultures other than what you were saying here, but we have a lot of baggage that it's so hard to say I failed at something. Like, it's no different. I had eggs for breakfast. Yeah, I had eggs for breakfast and bacon this morning with coffee. Is that significant? No. Well, I failed in this business, or I failed as a leader, and take that importance that we give to that emotional baggage out of it, because it's just a fact. It doesn't mean anything more than that. Yes, it had an impact financially and emotionally, but to let that be where it belongs just as a fact and move on. Not easy. I've had it myself many times.
The world is a different place. It always is, right? It's evolving, but this last year and 2 months has been a very different time. Are there things that you're advising or things that occur to you that, that we need to think about in terms of leadership that will better equip us, going forward?
There are probably many things, but one, I'm starting to be more open and listening more than talking, like really listening to what the opportunities are, because I think there are many, many opportunities that are showing up.
Yep.
This whole cryptocurrency world, I know it sounds, is a whole new world in finance that could impact how we do things. There's a area of NFTs, they call them non-fungible tokens, that will be a major breakthrough in terms of, you put an art piece up on a site and and somebody buys it, you get a percentage and that person gets a percentage, and it just keeps going out like that. And the ownership, and to prove ownership is just, you can't not. I mean, there's just many things to just be listening past our ways we already know things, and see if you can put aside everything that you know and try to listen openly to what could be possible. I mean, that lights me up when I do that, because we do have automatic ways we listen automatically, to our spouses. Oh, with my wife, I listen to her like she spends too much money. She buys food and she spends too much money. She buys something for the yard and it's too much money. And it gets in the way of having a relationship with her. I have to put that aside and go, maybe it's me. If I'm going to be a leader, I got to be responsible over here. Maybe it's me. It isn't her. Maybe I'm automatically listening a certain way to her.
Okay. Well, this is filters, right? These are our own filters.
Yeah,
that we
exactly.
So how do you remove those?
By just catching yourself do it. It's the best you can do.
Okay.
That's where you start to become aware of it and train yourself to let those go. Can't see it any other way, because you're human.
Okay.
That's what humans do. They
Is
have biases. Yeah.
Is part of that, now, at last, women are coming into leadership. The last year and 2 months, actually, there's been a setback relative to women in leadership, because so many have left the workforce. I've heard, that we've gone back decades, in terms of the women in leadership after so much progress. But we have paradigms around what a leader looks like, right? So when we look at, for instance, the head now of New Zealand, she's been very competent. She's handled COVID very effectively. And yet so many people can look at her, probably, men, and say, well, that's not a leader. And because they have that filter, right? And so it's similarly in business, right? We have that where, people get promoted and we figure, well, that can't be a leader because we have our own filter. So we have cleanup to do, right? All of us, relative to filters, whether it's that or other things. And what is you mentioned maybe like with your wife, first step is to at least acknowledge that you have the filter.
That's right. And
which
to
is
her
tough.
too. It works even to say, I discovered I have these colored glasses I look through, and what I see is, you're behaving that way, and it's me, it's not you.
Okay.
Because usually it's blame, right? It's you.
So at work, is that what we do? Is that, where, we have that conversation? To me, that goes back to that earlier thing. In my own Japanese way, I don't want to necessarily confront every issue, that there's like a nuanced way of handling it. But maybe what you're saying is, maybe sometimes the best way is to address it straight on.
Yeah. And couch it truthfully, if you're really real about it, that it isn't them, it's over here, and to take responsibility that way. And okay. I want you to know, this is what I'm experiencing, and I think it's because of me, it's not you. What do you see? Asking that question, what do you see, is a very good one.
I like that. I like that. I messed up with one of our executive directors, who's one of our top people, and I came at it from the standpoint of observing something that, to your point, to me wasn't the right approach. And so I, in my kind of New York style, kind of directly went right to, here's how you need to improve that. I think I actually almost said that. So I love, and by the way, it did not go well. It was, she was very offended, and it took probably another 30 minutes to kind of walk back out of that. And I feel horrible that I handled it all that way. I love what you're saying about, hey, it's not you, it's me, right? So, and then you're just kind of then you're saying how you perceive it, and you give them the opportunity to observe it a different way.
Yeah,
and then
yes, exactly. And to contribute to you, is there anything that you see that could improve
yeah,
my way of communicating with you? I'd
yeah.
really appreciate the feedback.
Okay, I really like that. And so
Because,
does that work with your wife?
yeah, we're in this couples coaching couples thing where we have two couples meet on Zoom, and we coach each other once a week, and that helps because they can see things where I'm blind and we're blind, and it's pretty good.
I see. So, and does it sometimes make sense then to get a third party, maybe
Yeah,
mediation isn't the right approach, but
yeah. And you know what I've discovered in relationships too, now we're getting into the personal side, but you would think that relationships are just about love. But here's the problem with that. Love comes and goes. There are days when I don't love my wife. That doesn't mean, aren't there days when you want to, oh, here's the analogy. Somebody interviewed Prince Philip. Oh, it was a reporter, and they said, Prince Philip, aren't there ever times when you want to divorce the Queen? He said, divorce, never. Murder, often. I thought that was a brilliant answer. You should write a book about that. Because there's times I just like to strangle her. I don't do that. But it doesn't mean I'm any less committed, because I think the source of a relationship working is commitment. And I've been married 40 years, and there are times when I want to just, and same in organization work, because, but it's me. When I bring the responsibility back to myself and own it, it clears up.
yeah.
It's not out there.
Michael, thank you for your comment about the stuff that's hidden, which I think goes to your response there, Barry. Yeah, we do walk through life not only with filters, but things that are hidden to us because of those filters and because of all the baggage that we're carrying around. And as leaders, that can be a real issue. So there are ways to help that, right? We can read all of those 225,000 books.
Oh my God.
Probably wouldn't be advisable.
I think the other thing is we're really hard on ourselves a lot of times. I mean, we really beat ourselves up from time to time. I shouldn't have done that. I made that mistake. But, in the long scale of being 80, 90 years, and then 200 years from now, no one's going to remember that anyway, is to lighten up about the significance of the mistakes you and I make, because we will. That's part of being human. It's part of being a leader, that you will mess up. And if you just be responsible for it and just clean it up the best you can, there are sometimes people won't listen to that, and they won't want to have a relationship with you. And that's just how it goes. You can't satisfy everybody. That's their
tough.
stuff.
That can be tough when you're leading a group, right? And there's somebody that doesn't get it, right? So what transfer them into another division, or what?
Well, now I don't want to get political on this. I don't know who's on here and who politics, Republican. I don't mean about that. I saw a video yesterday of Mitt Romney at the Republican convention in Utah being booed by the entire audience.
Yeah.
I mean, and he took certain steps and certain things that are true for him, and he had the courage to, in front out of the rest of the Senate, to stand for what he believes character is, and that is part of what it is to be a leader. And you will get fried for it from time to time. A lot of leaders get killed, but they're willing to risk it. Leadership is risky.
Yeah,
and business is risky.
It reminds me a little bit, going back to Erica's question, right? That at least I know in my own case that those noises, right? There's always noise going on, right? Because they're jealous of you, or they're the whole, or your parents, or whatever your genetics are, or whatever, that are questioning your ability to get to the next level. And my own reaction after so many years is, geez, I wish I would have known what I know now and push harder and faster and not listen to most of those voices, right? That as a leader, sometimes you just have to keep moving on. And I'm sure that's what Mitt Romney said, is he had the bigger purpose. Goes back to what you started out with, that people follow something that's bigger than just the normal kind of nonsense that the booers were doing. He has a value. You believe in democracy or you don't. You believe in these things or you don't. And he believes in it. He stands for it. And, lo and behold, if you want to boo it, fine. They're probably going to regret that. But he stood for something, and which is great. And I wish more people did.
And part of the authenticity of that is we live in a country where it's free to say it as it is for you.
Yeah.
And be respected for it. That's all. So he had a view that he's respected for, just like everybody else. You just don't have to boo it out in the big audience. But human, that's human beings for you. We're all how do I say it? A-holes. I'm not going to say it on.
we can
all
be.
Are. Sure. We're all inauthentic and not real in certain ways, and just being willing to just look at that really makes a difference. It's okay.
Thank you for taking us through that journey. There's Barry's contact information. Definitely reach out to him. He's just a wonderful person to know, and I'm sure would be happy to speak with you. Barry, thank you so much for your time today. Anything else that you'd like to say in final conclusion?
Right back at you, Doug. You're an extraordinary human being. Caesar is, your whole team is. I honor and respect exactly what you guys are up to. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be able to do these things. So thank you and your team, and thank the entire audience, how awesome they are to be here. Just a privilege to do this.
You're very kind. Thank you very much. The Global Tribe is amazing, and that's why we exist and what inspires us every day. I'll end this program with the quote that Barry I shared with you from this morning's Clubhouse. The African proverb, every morning at 7 a.m. Pacific time. I'll usually pop in while I'm doing work. And this morning's proverb is this from Africa. It doesn't have a specific country. A fool has to say something. A wise person has something to say. A fool has to say something. A wise person has something to say. And so we heard this morning, or this afternoon, depending on where you are, from a wise person. He had something to say. I don't think there's any fools on this line, but we know a few fools in our lives for sure who have lots of things to say. Don't listen to them. Listen to Barry, listen to smart folks, and listen to yourself. Because at the end of the day, you can do it. If you're involved with this and you're interested in kind of taking the next step with your own leadership, invariably you can do it. You will do it. And so thank you all for participating today, and reach out along the way for any help. Thanks for taking the time. And Barry, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Erica. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for your questions. And thanks, everybody.